A teen girl saved a dog trapped on a frozen lake, but when the owner's secret identity was revealed, it left her entire town completely shocked. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The snowflakes fell relentlessly from a slate-gray sky as Emma Reynolds adjusted her worn green coat, pulling it tighter against the biting wind. She stepped out of the office building. Another closed door, another rejection. The downtown street of Lakeside Falls was quiet, the few people hurrying past with heads bent against the weather, no one making eye contact. No one wanting to acknowledge another person's struggles in this town that had seen too many. Her fingertips, cold even through her thin gloves, reached up to secure the blue woolen hat more firmly on her head. The frayed edges of the hat brushed against her forehead. Her father's last gift before depression claimed him. 3 months without unemployment benefits, 6 months without proper work, and the bills kept piling up for her mother's medication. Emma checked her phone, 2:47 p.m. If she cut through the park and walked across the frozen lake, she could save 15 minutes on her way home. 15 minutes meant she could start dinner before her mother woke from her afternoon rest. The doctors called it fatigue, as if a simple word could explain her mother's exhaustion since the illness began. As she mentally calculated which expenses could still be cut, the internet, another layer of clothes instead of heating, Emma's boots crunched along the snowy path that wound down to the lake's edge. Lakeside Falls had once been vibrant, a factory town where generations had worked. Now it was like the lake in winter, still and rigid with unspoken hardship. She had just stepped onto the frozen surface when a desperate yelp cut through the frigid air. Emma paused, scanning the lake. There, about 50 yards out, a medium-sized brown dog stood trembling on a plate of ice that was visibly beginning to fracture around its paws. "Oh no," she whispered, her breath clouding before her. Near the shore, 2 teenage boys stood with their phones raised, recording the animal's plight. "Have you called anyone?" Emma asked, hurrying over to them. The taller boy shrugged without lowering his phone. "Fire department doesn't come for dogs." "Someone call the fire department," Emma shouted to anyone who might hear. An elderly woman walking her tiny poodle on the shore path looked over but made no move to help. Emma glanced at her phone. No emergency services would arrive in time. The dog yelped again, a pitiful sound that seemed to echo across the frozen expanse. A louder crack followed as the ice plate tilted slightly. Without conscious thought, Emma was moving. She dropped her purse on the bank and stepped onto the ice. "Hey, what are you doing?" the elderly woman called out. "You'll fall through." "Get back," the shorter teenager added, though his phone remained focused on the scene, now with Emma in the frame. Emma ignored them. She'd grown up in Lakeside Falls. She knew how to navigate ice. Dropping to all fours, she spread her weight as she'd been taught as a child, moving carefully forward by sliding on her stomach. "It's okay," she called to the dog whose big brown eyes were fixed on her with a desperate hope that tightened her chest. "I'm coming." The ice groaned beneath her. 15 feet out now. 20. The dog whined, attempting to move toward her, but stopping when the ice cracked further. "Stay still, buddy," Emma called, her voice calm despite the racing of her heart. She was distantly aware of more voices at the shore now, a small crowd gathering. The dog's ice plate was barely holding together, water beginning to seep over its edges. 30 feet out, 40. The cold of the ice seeped through her coat, her jeans. Her fingers were growing numb despite the gloves. 5 more feet. The dog's rear paws slipped into the frigid water, and it yelped in panic. "Almost there." Emma stretched her arm out as far as she could. Her fingers brushed the dog's collar just as the ice plate disintegrated completely. With a desperate lunge, she grabbed the collar firmly, hauling the animal partly onto her own section of ice. The dog was heavier than it looked, its fur instantly soaking through her coat sleeve with frigid lake water. "I've got you," she murmured, clutching the trembling animal. Let's get back. The return journey was even more perilous. The ice cracked ominously under their combined weight. Emma moved inch by inch, pulling the terrified dog alongside her, its wet fur freezing in the bitter air. "Keep your weight spread out," she instructed the animal as if it could understand. Perhaps it did, because it remained flat against the ice, mirroring her movements. After what seemed like an eternity, Emma's boots scraped against the rougher ice near the shore. Hands reached out. Someone was helping pull them the final few feet to safety. "You're insane!" the elderly woman scolded as Emma finally stood on solid ground, the soaking wet dog clutched in her arms. "You could have drowned." Emma's entire body shook, partly from cold, partly from the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Water dripped from her coat and the dog's fur, beginning to freeze almost immediately in the bitter air. "Does anyone know this dog?" Emma called out, looking at the small crowd that had gathered. "Does he belong to someone?" No one stepped forward. The two teenagers were still filming, one of them muttering, "This is gonna blow up online." "I've never seen it around here," the elderly woman said, keeping her own poodle at a safe distance. Emma looked down at the shivering animal. Its brown eyes gazed back at her with unmistakable gratitude. No collar tag, just a simple leather collar. A mutt of some kind, part Labrador, maybe some shepherd. "Guess you're coming with me for now," she whispered, wrapping her coat more securely around the dog. The walk home took twice as long, her wet clothes stiffening in the cold, the dog a warm but heavy bundle in her arms. By the time Emma climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, her muscles were screaming in protest. Inside, the warmth was immediate relief. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom which her mother occupied, a fold-out couch in the living room for Emma, a kitchen barely big enough for a small table. But it was warm, and right now that was everything. "Mom?" Emma called softly. No answer, still resting then. She set the dog down on the faded linoleum of the kitchen floor. "Stay," she whispered, though she needn't have bothered. The animal was too exhausted to move. Emma quickly gathered old towels and a worn blanket, creating a makeshift bed in the corner of the living room. She dried the dog as best she could, its fur slowly revealing a rich chocolate-brown color as it dried. "You need a name," she murmured, rubbing its ears gently. "How about Lucky? Because that's what you are today." Lucky responded with a gentle lick to her hand. "Emma?" Her mother's voice came from the bedroom doorway. Patricia Reynolds stood there in her robe, deep circles under her eyes, her once vibrant hair now thin and graying. "What is that?" "A dog, Mom. He was trapped on the lake. The ice was breaking." Her mother sighed, leaning against the door frame. "We can't keep him, Emma." "Just until we find his owner," Emma promised, though her heart already ached at the thought of letting the animal go. "I'll check for missing dog reports tomorrow." Her mother didn't have the energy to argue. She simply nodded, shuffling back to her room. "Make sure it doesn't make a mess." Emma changed into dry clothes, hung her wet ones over the shower rod, and found a chipped bowl for water and another for some leftover chicken from yesterday's dinner. Lucky ate ravenously, then curled up on the blanket nest, his eyes following Emma's movements around the small apartment. "Just temporary," she reminded both of them. That night, as she slept on the fold-out couch, Lucky moved from his blanket to the floor beside her, his warm body a comforting presence in the darkness. Morning brought weak sunshine and a notification storm on Emma's phone. The video of her rescue had indeed blown up online. Local news outlets were sharing it, calling her brave, reckless, heroic, foolish, depending on who was commenting. Her social media accounts were flooded with friend requests and messages from strangers. None, however, were claims to Lucky's ownership. The pattern continued for 3 days. Emma walked Lucky between job applications, posted "found dog" notices around town, and checked with the local shelter. Her mother's attitude toward the animal softened slightly when Lucky laid his head gently on her lap during an evening when her pain was particularly bad. "He knows," her mother had whispered, petting his soft head. "Animals always know." On the third evening, as Emma returned from another unsuccessful job interview, a sharp knock came at the apartment door. The sound was authoritative, nothing like Mrs. Hendricks from next door or the occasional delivery person. Lucky's ears perked up, and he moved to the door, tail beginning to wag tentatively. Emma opened the door to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit that seemed absurdly out of place in the worn hallway of her apartment building. His dark hair was precisely cut, his clean-shaven face angular and somehow familiar. "I've come for my dog," he said coldly. Emma's stomach dropped as recognition dawned. She knew that face from local news headlines and protest signs. Thomas Blackwood, the billionaire who had purchased the town's factory, the same factory that had closed down and led her father into the unemployment that preceded his fatal depression. "His name is Rusty, not Lucky," Thomas Blackwood corrected, extending a hand toward Ape, the dog who had suddenly transformed from a timid houseguest into an ecstatic ball of fur. Rusty bounded toward Blackwood with unmistakable joy, tail whipping back and forth so vigorously his entire body wiggled. Emma watched the reunion with mixed emotions. The dog's response made ownership undeniable. No animal faked that kind of recognition. But seeing Blackwood in person, standing in her doorway, made her stomach knot with resentment. "I have a substantial reward for you," Blackwood continued, reaching into his suit jacket and producing an envelope. His eyes surveyed the modest apartment behind her, the worn furniture, the patched curtains, the small stack of unpaid bills barely hidden beneath a magazine on the coffee table. Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks. Whether from shame at their humble surroundings or anger at his presumption, she wasn't certain. Possibly both. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "You've taken enough from this family already when you closed the factory and my father lost everything." Blackwood's expression hardened, the polite veneer slipping momentarily. "I didn't close any factory. I purchased an already bankrupt structure. To turn into luxury condos, everyone knows your plans." The words burst from Emma with more force than she intended. Years of accumulated grief finding a convenient target. "You seem to know a great deal about my business strategies," Blackwood replied coolly. "Perhaps you should consider a career in corporate intelligence." "Emma? Who's at the door?" Her mother's voice came from behind, and Emma felt her heart sink. Patricia Reynolds appeared in the hallway behind her, still frail but dressed today, her thin sweater hanging loosely on her diminished frame. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please forgive my daughter. The past few years have been difficult since my husband." "Mom, don't!" Emma protested, but her mother had already stepped forward. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Blackwood said, his tone softening considerably. His gaze moved around the apartment again, but more carefully this time. It paused on the blue hat hanging carefully by the door, treated with a reverence that suggested it was more than just winter wear. "Thank you," Patricia replied. "Please, would you like to come in? It's not much, but—" "Mom, Mr. Blackwood was just leaving with his dog," Emma interrupted firmly. Blackwood looked between the two women, something unreadable crossing his features. "Perhaps we could discuss something beyond money," he said finally. "I need someone at the new facility with your determination." "New facility?" Emma frowned, confusion momentarily displacing her anger. Before Blackwood could explain, Emma's phone rang. The hospital's number flashed on the screen, sending a wave of dread through her. She answered immediately, turning away from Blackwood. "Yes, this is Emma Reynolds," she said, her voice tightening. The conversation was brief but devastating. More tests needed for her mother, specialized ones not covered by their limited insurance. "I have to go," Emma said abruptly when she hung up, turning back to Blackwood. "Take your dog." He nodded, clipping a leash to Rusty's collar. "We'll continue this conversation another time." "There's nothing to continue," Emma replied, though her voice lacked conviction now, the hospital call having drained her energy for confrontation. Hours later, Emma sat in a cold hospital corridor, her phone's battery indicator flashing red as she searched for information about Thomas Blackwood. The articles painted contradictory pictures, some describing a ruthless businessman who bought failing companies just to asset strip them, others praising innovative corporate turnarounds and substantial anonymous charitable donations. A few gossip sites suggested Blackwood deliberately obscured his background, speaking with what linguistic experts claimed was a cultivated accent designed to mask his origins. One particularly lurid article hinted at possible involvement with illegal activities overseas before his emergence as a legitimate businessman. None of it told her what she needed to know. What were his real plans for Lakeside Falls? And why offer her, of all people, a job? "Ms. Reynolds?" a nurse called, breaking her concentration. "Your mother's done. The doctor would like to speak with you." More tests, more treatments, more expenses they couldn't afford. Emma nodded mechanically through the doctor's explanation, already calculating which bills could be delayed, which necessities could be further reduced. It was past midnight when she finally unlocked their apartment door, exhaustion weighing her limbs. The first thing she noticed was the silence. No clicking of dog nails on the floor, no soft whine of greeting. An unexpected pang of loss hit her. She'd grown attached to Rusty in just those few days. The second thing she noticed was the envelope on the coffee table. Thick, expensive cream-colored paper with her name written in precise handwriting. Beside it sat a leather portfolio. The envelope contained enough cash to cover all the medical expenses the doctor had outlined, with a considerable sum remaining. No note, no conditions attached. The portfolio held detailed architectural plans, not for luxury condos, but for a factory redesigned with cutting-edge sustainable technology. Solar panels on the expansive roof, water reclamation systems, modernized production spaces alongside training facilities and community areas. Emma spread the plans across the small table, her tired mind struggling to reconcile these documents with the villain she'd constructed in her imagination. These weren't the plans of someone intending to exploit the town. They were hopeful, visionary even. She barely slept that night, the plans and the money equally troubling her conscience. By morning, she'd made a decision. After getting her mother settled with medication and breakfast, Emma bundled up against the continuing cold and headed to the old factory site. She'd expected to find fencing, perhaps some preliminary equipment. Instead, the site hummed with activity. Workers in safety gear moved purposefully across the grounds. Heavy machinery was already clearing sections of the old structure while preserving others. There was life again, in a place that, for Emma, had represented only death. A familiar brown shape bounded toward her, Rusty racing across the frozen ground with evident joy at seeing her again. And behind him, not in his immaculate suit but in work clothes and a hard hat, came Thomas Blackwood. "You altered the plans after the town protested?" Emma asked without preamble, suspicion still coloring her voice despite the evidence before her. "These were always the plans," Blackwood replied evenly. "But you're right about one thing. I'm not who everyone thinks." Before he could elaborate, a commotion erupted at the site's entrance. A group of about 20 people marched toward the gates carrying hastily made signs. "No more broken promises," and "Blackwood Mako, destruction" among them. At their head strode Mayor Wilson, his face flushed with righteous indignation even in the cold. "Out, Blackwood! We don't want your lies," the mayor shouted through a small megaphone. Emma scanned the protesters' faces and felt her heart skip when she recognized Jake Turner, her father's former colleague, aggressively waving a sign. The same man who, she knew, had spread rumors about her father embezzling funds before the original factory bankruptcy. Rumors that had persisted even after her father's death. "This factory means more to me than you can imagine," Blackwood said quietly, for Emma's ears only, as security personnel moved to intercept the demonstrators. Something in his tone made Emma turn to study his face. For just a moment she glimpsed something beneath the composed exterior, a flicker of what might have been old pain, quickly masked. "You're not from here," she responded, trying to understand. "Everyone knows you're just an outsider looking to profit." "Everyone knows what the newspapers told them," Blackwood said, his jaw tightening slightly. "How about a tour of the site? Perhaps then you'll understand." Emma hesitated, looking between Blackwood and the protesters. Jake Turner was now shouting something specific about outsiders and carpetbaggers, his face contorted with a fury that seemed excessive even for the circumstances. "Fine," she agreed reluctantly. "But just a quick tour." As they walked away from the commotion, Rusty trotting beside them, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much more complicated than a simple job offer from her father's supposed enemy. With curiosity overcoming her distrust, Emma decided to visit the old factory site the next day, determined to discover if Blackwood's intentions were genuine or just another scheme to exploit the town. The reconstructed factory stood against the winter sky, like a vision from the past and future colliding, half-demolished walls alongside gleaming new steel beams. Emma surveyed the scene, still struggling to reconcile the bustling activity before her with the abandoned shell that had haunted the town's skyline for years. Workers in hard hats moved with purpose, their breath visible in the cold air as they called instructions to one another. Most of the original structure was salvageable, Blackwood explained, guiding her past a security checkpoint. Unlike yesterday when he'd appeared at her door in his impeccable suit, today he looked almost ordinary in work boots, jeans, and a thick jacket with the company logo. Almost. Except for the quiet authority that seemed to radiate from him regardless of his attire. "Are these local workers?" Emma asked, noting a few familiar faces among the crew. Blackwood nodded. 80% local hires, many former employees. The rest are specialists brought in temporarily. He gestured toward a cluster of people reviewing blueprints. "We're preserving as much of the original architecture as safety allows." Emma's skepticism remained firmly in place despite the evidence before her eyes. "So you're actually revitalizing the factory, not building luxury condos. Why did you let everyone believe otherwise?" "I never made any statements about condos," Blackwood replied evenly. "The town made assumptions based on my other developments. I don't typically correct rumors. It's inefficient." "Inefficient," Emma repeated flatly. "People's lives and hopes aren't spreadsheets, Mr. Blackwood." A flicker of something, possibly amusement, crossed his face. "No, they're far more complicated." They continued walking through the site, Rusty trotting ahead as if he'd appointed himself tour guide. The dog seemed remarkably at home amid the construction. "He comes with me everywhere," Blackwood explained, following her gaze. "Factory sites, board meetings. My executive team has learned to keep dog treats in their desk drawers." The image of stern-faced executives feeding treats to Rusty almost made Emma smile. Almost. As they rounded a partially demolished wall, the protest chants grew louder again. Emma glanced toward the front gates where security personnel were engaged in tense conversation with Mayor Wilson. "Your security seems to have the situation under control," she observed. "For now. But anger like that doesn't dissipate easily, especially when it's being deliberately stoked." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Blackwood's reply was interrupted by a site manager, hurrying toward them with a clipboard. "Mr. Blackwood, we've uncovered something in the administrative section you should see." They followed the manager to a section of the old offices where workers had removed damaged drywall, exposing the original structure underneath. Emma felt a strange disorientation. Her father had worked in these very offices for nearly 20 years before the bankruptcy. "We found these marks behind the newer construction," the manager said, pointing to a doorframe that had been uncovered. Emma moved closer, curiosity overtaking her reluctance. Carved into the wooden frame were dozens of horizontal lines with dates and initials beside them, height measurements spanning decades. "The annual employee family picnic," Blackwood explained, his voice taking on an unusual softness. "Every July, they'd measure the employees' children against this doorframe. A factory tradition." Emma stared at the markings, memories surfacing. "My dad used to bring me here for those picnics. I'd forgotten about the measurements." "See these markings here?" Blackwood pointed to a series of notches from the late 1990s. "JM." His finger traced the progression of the lines moving upward as the years advanced. "Joey Miller," Blackwood said so quietly Emma almost didn't hear him. For a brief moment, his composed mask seemed to slip, revealing something raw underneath. Emma felt her breath catch. The name triggered something, a dim memory of her father mentioning a boy, a sad story she couldn't quite recall. "Joey Miller," she repeated slowly. "Why do I know that name?" Blackwood straightened, his momentary vulnerability disappearing so completely, Emma almost doubted she'd seen it. "He was the supervisor's son. Grew up in this factory like many kids in Lakeside Falls." "And what happened to him?" Emma pressed, sensing there was more. Blackwood's eyes met hers. "He disappeared after his parents died. Became a ward of the state. Foster system." His words were clipped, clinical. "And you know this because I researched the history of every property I acquire." He turned to the site manager. "Make sure this section is preserved. The entire door frame needs to be carefully extracted and incorporated into the new design." The manager nodded, making notes on his clipboard before hurrying away to direct the workers. Emma studied Blackwood's profile, noticing tension in his jaw that hadn't been there moments before. "There's something you're not telling me." "There are many things I'm not telling you, Ms. Reynolds. We've known each other less than 24 hours. Why did you really offer me a job? It can't just be because I rescued your dog." Blackwood's reply was interrupted by a crash and shouting from the direction of the gates. They turned to see that the situation had escalated. Several protesters had pushed past the initial security line and were now inside the perimeter. "We need to move to a secure area," Blackwood said, his tone shifting to urgent. He spoke rapidly into a radio, directing security personnel. Emma recognized Jake Turner at the front of the group that had breached the gates. His face contorted with rage as he shouted at workers to stand with the town, not with the outsider. "Your father knew the truth," Blackwood said suddenly, pulling Emma toward a doorway as the commotion grew louder. "About the bankruptcy, about Turner's involvement." "What are you talking about?" "Your father was investigating discrepancies in the books before the closure. He found evidence of embezzlement. Not by the management, as Turner claimed, but by Turner himself." Emma felt as if the ground had tilted beneath her. "That's impossible. Turner was Dad's friend. He spoke at his funeral." "Your father knew the truth," Blackwood continued, his voice low and intense as they moved deeper into the building. "He was close to exposing it when—" His words were cut off by a sharp cracking sound, followed by the acrid smell of smoke. Outside, shouts of alarm replaced protest chants. "Fire!" someone yelled. Security guards were now rushing toward the gates rather than away from them. Blackwood swore under his breath, reaching for his radio again. "Status report." The response was garbled but clear enough. "Molotov cocktail at the east entrance. Fire spreading to construction. Materials." "Evacuate all personnel," Blackwood ordered, then turned to Emma. "We need to get out of here. The old timber sections will go up quickly." They moved toward what should have been the nearest exit, only to find the path already blocked by spreading flames. The dry wood and construction materials had indeed caught fire with alarming speed. "This way," Blackwood redirected, pulling Emma toward another corridor. Rusty raced ahead, seemingly unfazed by the growing chaos. Emma could hear sirens in the distance, fire trucks responding, but they would take precious minutes to arrive. Smoke was already filling the corridors, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. "Why would they do this?" Emma coughed, pulling her scarf over her mouth. "Fear makes people unpredictable," Blackwood replied grimly. They reached another exit only to find it blocked by fallen debris. A support beam had collapsed, bringing part of the ceiling down with it. "We need to find another way out," Blackwood said, his calm voice belied by the tension in his face. The smoke was thickening, making Emma's eyes water and her lungs burn. She could hear the fire's hungry roar growing louder, consuming the old factory that had been the heart of Lakeside Falls for generations. Suddenly, Rusty began barking frantically, not at the fire, but at a side corridor they had passed. "He knows a way," Blackwood said, turning to follow the dog. "Trust him." Emma hesitated only a moment before following. Rusty led them down a narrow hallway to what appeared to be a dead end, except for a small maintenance hatch near the floor. "An old ventilation duct," Blackwood explained, dropping to his knees to examine it. "It leads to the exterior loading area." He pulled the grate free, revealing a tight passage. "You go first." Emma eyed the narrow opening dubiously. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." He helped her into the opening. "Go, Rusty will follow you." The duct was cramped and dusty, but free of smoke. Emma crawled forward, hearing Rusty's nails scrabbling on the metal behind her. The passage seemed to stretch endlessly, the metal hot beneath her palms. Finally, she saw light ahead, another grate leading to the outside. She pushed against it, relief washing over her as it gave way. Fresh air hit her smoke-stained face as she tumbled out onto frozen ground. Rusty emerged seconds later, shaking himself vigorously. Emma turned, expecting to see Blackwood right behind, but the duct remained empty. "Blackwood," she called, moving back toward the opening. A series of shouts from around the corner of the building drew her attention. The protest had devolved into chaos, with firefighters now arriving to battle the blaze while police attempted to control the crowd. Jake Turner stood at the center of it all, his face illuminated by the flames consuming the factory. When he spotted Emma, his expression shifted from righteous anger to something closer to fear. "Where's Blackwood?" he shouted, pushing toward her. "The imposter needs to confess what he did." Before Emma could respond, a deafening boom shook the ground as a section of the factory collapsed in a shower of sparks and debris. Horror swept through her as she realized Blackwood was still inside. While flames devoured the structure that held so many secrets, Emma stood frozen, watching helplessly as part of the building collapsed with Blackwood still inside. The flames leapt hungrily toward the sky, devouring the partially renovated structure with terrifying speed. Emma stood rooted to the spot, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the section of the building where Blackwood had been collapse in on itself. Around her, chaos reigned, firefighters shouting instructions, police attempting to corral protesters, the wail of sirens cutting through the winter air. "He's still in there," she managed to say, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. A firefighter grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, you need to move back. The structure is unstable." Emma allowed herself to be pulled toward the safety perimeter, Rusty pressing anxiously against her legs. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the burning building, his posture alert, as if expecting his master to emerge at any moment. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the firefighters battled the blaze. More emergency vehicles arrived, their lights painting the snow in alternating red and blue. Emma watched numbly as paramedics set up a triage area, preparing for potential victims. A female police officer approached, notebook in hand. "You were inside when the fire started?" Emma nodded, her gaze still locked on the burning factory. "Yes, with Thomas Blackwood. He He didn't make it out. The officer made a note. We're questioning several individuals, including Jacob Turner. He's admitted to involvement in the incident. This finally pulled Emma's attention away from the fire. Jake? He started this? He's claiming it was meant to be a distraction, not a destructive fire. The officer's expression suggested what she thought of that explanation. But that's not all. He's made some interesting statements about the factory's original bankruptcy. Emma's hands clenched into fists. What kind of statements? He's confessed to financial fraud dating back to the original factory closure. Not your father, as was widely believed. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. All these years, her father's reputation had been tarnished by whispers and rumors that he'd embezzled funds, that his suicide was an admission of guilt. Now, in the midst of this new disaster, the truth was finally emerging. Turner says he was afraid Blackwood would discover the truth when reviewing the old financial records, the officer continued. Apparently, that's why he's been leading the opposition to the redevelopment. Before Emma could process this information, a shout went up from near the building. The firefighters had found someone. Emma pushed forward, straining to see through the smoke and emergency personnel. Paramedics rushed forward with a stretcher, disappearing briefly into a section of the building that wasn't fully engulfed. When they re-emerged, a figure lay on the stretcher, motionless, covered in soot, but recognizably Blackwood. Is he? Emma couldn't finish the question. They've got a pulse, someone nearby reported, but it doesn't look good. Emma watched as the paramedics worked efficiently, attaching an oxygen mask, checking vitals, starting an IV. Rusty whined pitifully, trying to move toward his master but held back by Emma's tight grip on his collar. Stay, Rusty, she murmured. Let them help him. The ambulance departed with sirens blaring, carrying Blackwood to the nearest hospital. Emma stood amid the chaos, suddenly uncertain what to do. The revelation about Turner, Blackwood's injury, the destruction of the factory that was supposed to bring new life to Lakeside Falls. It was too much to process. Ms. Reynolds? A man in a suit approached, clearly not a first responder. I'm David Chen, Mr. Blackwood's chief of operations. He instructed me to contact you if anything happened to him. He did. When? Yesterday, after meeting you. Chen handed her a business card. A car is waiting to take you to the hospital if you wish to go. We can arrange care for the dog as well. Emma looked down at Rusty, who seemed to understand what was being discussed. No, he comes with me. Blackwood would want him there. The sleek company car felt out of place in Lakeside Falls, drawing stares as it maneuvered through streets more accustomed to pickup trucks and modest sedans. Emma sat silently in the back seat, Rusty's head resting on her lap, his brown eyes mournful. At the hospital, Chen's authorities smoothed their way past the usual restrictions. While Rusty couldn't enter the treatment areas, a sympathetic nurse agreed he could wait in an empty office near the emergency department. Mr. Blackwood is in critical condition, a doctor informed them. Smoke inhalation, second-degree burns on his arms and back, and a concussion from falling debris. The next 24 hours will be crucial. Can I see him? Emma asked, surprising herself with the request. The doctor hesitated. Briefly, he's unconscious and has been intubated to help his breathing. The figure in the hospital bed bore little resemblance to the commanding presence she'd met just days ago. Blackwood lay still, his face partially obscured by the breathing tube, monitors beeping steadily beside him. Bandages covered his arms where he'd apparently tried to shield himself from the flames. Emma stood awkwardly at his bedside, unsure why she'd even asked to come in. This man was still essentially a stranger, a controversial figure in her town, possibly connected to her father's death, definitely connected to her current upheaval. Yet something kept her there, watching the mechanical rise and fall of his chest. We found something in his pocket, a nurse said, handing Emma a charred wallet. The paramedics thought it might be important. He was clutching it when they found him. Emma opened the scorched leather wallet carefully. Inside, protected from the worst of the damage, was a folded photograph. She gently extracted it, revealing a faded image of the factory's annual picnic from approximately 20 years ago. In the foreground stood her father, younger and smiling, his arm around a skinny boy who might have been 12 or 13. She turned the photo over. On the back, in her father's handwriting, "Robert and Joey, Factory Picnic 2003, last one before everything changed." Emma stared at the image, memories stirring. Joey Miller, the supervisor's son. The boy who disappeared after his parents died in what she vaguely recalled was a car accident. Why would Blackwood have this photo? Why would he risk his life to save it from the fire? Unless... The impossible thought formed in her mind. But before she could fully grasp it, her phone rang. Her mother's ringtone. "Mom, are you okay?" "I should be asking you that," Patricia Reynolds replied, her voice tight with worry. "It's all over the news. The fire at the factory. Thomas Blackwood injured. They said there were other people inside." "I'm fine, Mom. I got out before the worst of it." Emma didn't mention how close she'd come to being trapped. "I'm at the hospital now. Blackwood he's in bad shape." A pause. "Emma, there's something you should know. I found something while you were gone." "What is it?" Emma stepped out of the hospital room, moving to a quieter corner of the corridor. "I was looking for my old insurance paperwork in your father's filing cabinet. I found a diary he kept during his last year at the factory. The last entries, they mentioned Joey Miller." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "What do they say, Mom?" "That he helped the boy leave town, gave him money for a bus ticket. He wrote that it was the only chance the boy had against a system that had failed him repeatedly." Patricia's voice faltered. "Emma, he felt so guilty afterward, wondering if he'd done the right thing. The boy was only 16. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that seemed simultaneously impossible and the only explanation that made sense. Mom, I need to see that diary, and I might not be home tonight. I'll explain everything later." After hanging up, Emma returned to Blackwood's room. She studied his unconscious face with new eyes, trying to see past the successful businessman to the desperate teenager her father had helped escape. "Joey Miller?" she whispered, watching for any reaction. There was none, but she hadn't really expected one in his condition. Emma left the hospital room, collecting Rusty from the office where he'd been waiting patiently. In the corridor outside the ICU, she met Chen again. "Any change?" he asked. She shook her head. "The doctor says it will take time." Chen nodded, his professional demeanor slipping slightly to reveal genuine concern. "Ms. Reynolds, I've arranged a hotel room nearby if you wish to stay close to the hospital. Mr. Blackwood would want you to be comfortable." Emma considered refusing. She had already accepted too much from Blackwood, or whoever he really was. But the thought of the long trip back to her apartment, explaining everything to her mother, then returning in the morning, exhausted her. "Thank you. Just for tonight." The hotel room was luxurious in a way Emma hadn't experienced in years, not since before her father's death, when their family had occasionally taken modest vacations. Rusty seemed equally impressed, sniffing every corner before settling on the plush carpet near the bed. Emma showered, washing away the smoke and grime from the fire. As the hot water cascaded over her, the day's events replayed in her mind. The tour of the factory, Blackwood's cryptic comments about her father, Turner's confession, the devastating fire, and now this new suspicion about Blackwood's true identity. When she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in the hotel's soft robe, she found her phone ringing again, an unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Reynolds, this is Nurse Jenkins from Lake Regional. Mr. Blackwood is awake and asking for you." Emma dressed quickly, her heart racing. By the time she and Rusty arrived back at the hospital, it was nearly midnight. The ICU was quiet, most visitors gone for the night. Blackwood was sitting up slightly, the breathing tube removed, though oxygen still flowed through a nasal cannula. His eyes were alert, despite the exhaustion evident in his face. "You stayed," he said, his voice raspy from the smoke and intubation. Emma approached the bed, Rusty straining at the leash until she let him move forward to gently nose Blackwood's hand. "I found this," she said, showing him the photograph from his wallet. "And my mother found my father's diary. He wrote about helping Joey Miller leave town." Blackwood's eyes closed briefly, either from pain or emotion. Emma couldn't tell which. "Why come back?" she asked, holding the diary her mother had delivered to the hospital. "Why not just continue your billionaire life somewhere else?" He smiled weakly. "Because some debts can only be repaid by returning to your origins. Your father taught me that." Emma folded the worn diary closed, its pages yellowed with age, and looked at Blackwood's still form in the hospital bed. 3 weeks had passed since the fire, yet these quiet moments at his bedside had become strangely familiar. The steady beeping of monitors provided a rhythm to her thoughts as she processed everything she'd learned from her father's private writings. "Did you know," she said softly, though Blackwood remained sedated after his latest surgery, "that my father wrote about you almost every day during his last year? He wondered if he'd made the right choice helping you leave." She traced the faded ink on the diary's cover. A particular entry from 15 years ago stood out. "Today I helped Joey leave. It's his only chance against a system that would destroy him." The bruises on his arms, the hollow look in his eyes after the last foster home. "No child deserves that. I gave him my savings for the bus ticket. He promised to make something of himself. I believe he will." The door opened quietly as Dr. Mara entered to check Blackwood's vitals. "Any change today?" Emma shook her head. "Still the same. How much longer will he be sedated?" "We're reducing the medication today. The skin grafts are taking well." The doctor made notations on the chart. "He's remarkably resilient." After the doctor left, Emma returned to her one-sided conversation. It had become therapeutic, talking to the unconscious Blackwood about her discoveries. "The police interviewed me again yesterday. Turner is fully cooperating now." She had visited the police station earlier that week, where Detective Collins had shared Turner's expanded confession. Through the observation window, she'd watched the man who had once been her father's colleague admit to his crimes. "Your father discovered the discrepancies," Turner had explained, his once imposing frame diminished by the standard-issue jumpsuit and the weight of his confession. "He threatened to expose me. When he was gone, I thought the secret was safe." Turner described methodically falsifying documents, gradually siphoning funds, then framing Robert Reynolds when questions arose. The embezzlement allegations had followed Robert to his grave, tainting his memory and isolating his grieving family. "I should have known my father was innocent," Emma whispered to Blackwood's still form. "I never should have doubted him." When she returned to the apartment that evening, she'd found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the diary pages. "I always knew he was innocent," Patricia had said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Even when everyone turned against us, when the neighbors stopped talking to us, when his friends abandoned him, I knew." The memory still burned in Emma's chest. 15 years of needless shame and isolation. 15 years of her father's name being whispered alongside words like thief and fraud. She glanced at her watch. Time to head back to the factory site. Since the fire, she'd taken on an unofficial role overseeing the cleanup. Chen had formalized the position a week ago, presenting her with an employment contract that made her interim project coordinator with a salary that had momentarily taken her breath away. "I'll be back tomorrow," she told the unconscious Blackwood, gathering her father's diary and her ever-present green coat. "Try not to cause any trouble while I'm gone." The factory site bore little resemblance to the inferno that had nearly claimed Blackwood's life. Most of the debris had been cleared, and architectural plans for the rebuilding were already underway. Emma supervised a team cataloging salvageable materials, her clipboard in hand as workers sorted through reclaimed brick and timber. "Ms. Reynolds," called one of the workers, "we found another box of documents in the East Wing, mostly undamaged." Emma made her way carefully across the site, her boots crunching on frost-covered gravel. The winter sun cast long shadows across the cleared space where once the heart of Lakeside Falls had beaten. Even now, with the promise of renewal, there was something poignant about the emptiness. "These look like personnel files," she observed, examining the box. "We should send them to Mr. Chen for review." "Emma." She turned to see Blackwood approaching, his arms still in a sling, his normally immaculate appearance softened by casual clothes and the lingering effects of his injuries. Rusty bounded ahead, greeting Emma with enthusiastic familiarity before racing back to his master's side. "Should you be out of the hospital?" she asked, surprise overriding formality. "I signed myself out." He surveyed the workers and their progress with obvious approval. "My recovery will go faster here than in that sterile room." Emma bit back a lecture about medical advice. Something in his expression, a determination that mirrored her own stubbornness, told her it would be wasted breath. "We're making good progress," she reported instead. The structural engineer confirmed that the foundation is sound and most of the original brick facade can be preserved. Blackwood nodded, watching the workers with an intensity that seemed personal. This place deserves to be rebuilt properly. Before Emma could respond, Chen approached with a tablet displaying the latest architectural renderings. The three of them moved to a temporary trailer set up as an office, discussing modifications and timelines. Later that afternoon, a contentious town hall meeting revealed how deeply divided Lakeside Falls remained about the project. Mayor Wilson had resigned following Turner's allegations, leaving the council scrambling to maintain order. Half the town welcomed the economic opportunity, the other half remained suspicious of Blackwood's intentions. "My father believed in him when no one else did," Emma found herself saying during the public comment period, surprising herself with her vehemence. "He saw something worth saving. Maybe we should try doing the same for this town." Back at the construction site after the meeting, Emma discovered an old photograph tucked between salvaged blueprints. The factory's employee picnic from 1998. Rows of workers and their families smiled at the camera, including her father and a skinny, dark-haired boy who could only be Joey Miller. "I was 11 in that photo," Blackwood said quietly, appearing beside her. "Your father had just taught me how to play chess. He said it would teach me strategic thinking." Emma studied the image. "You look happy." "I was when I was here." He gestured to the factory grounds. "This place was safety for me. Stability. After my parents died." He didn't finish, but Emma had read enough in her father's diary to know how the Miller boy's life had spiraled after becoming a ward of the state. "How did you build your fortune?" she asked, the question that had been nagging at her since discovering his true identity. Blackwood, or Joey, she still wasn't sure what to call him, gazed out over the construction site. "After I left, I worked on cargo ships for a while, then mining operations in South America. I saved every penny, made some smart investments in early tech startups, got lucky. And somewhere along the way, Joey Miller became Thomas Blackwood." He nodded. Joey Miller had a juvenile record, foster care history, no connections. Thomas Blackwood had a business degree from a prestigious university and a clean slate. A complete reinvention. Not complete. His eyes met hers. "I carried your father's image with me all those years, his voice telling me I could be more than my past." That evening, Emma invited Blackwood to her family's apartment for the first time since he'd appeared looking for Rusty. Patricia had insisted, saying it was time they properly thanked the man rebuilding what her husband had loved. Emma showed Blackwood to her childhood bedroom, preserved almost exactly as it had been when her father died. Sports trophies from high school, faded posters, and several framed photographs of the old factory hung on the walls. "My father used to bring home pictures of the production floor," she explained, pointing to one particularly detailed image. "He was so proud of the operation. Used to say American manufacturing could compete with anyone if given the right tools." Blackwood studied the photos with undisguised emotion. He was right. Dinner was simple. Her mother's homemade lasagna served on mismatched plates, but the conversation flowed more easily than Emma would have expected. Patricia asked thoughtful questions about the rebuilding plans, while Rusty dozed contentedly at Blackwood's feet. As they were finishing, a knock at the door revealed several neighbors bearing casseroles and offers of help for the reconstruction. "We heard what really happened with Robert," explained Mrs. Hendricks from next door. "The whole town's talking about Turner's confession. We wanted you to know. We're sorry for believing the worst." The gesture sparked something in Lakeside Falls, a tentative healing. Over the next few days, more residents approached Emma or her mother, offering support or simply acknowledgement. Former workers volunteered their knowledge of the old factory systems, providing invaluable insights for the reconstruction. From his office window at City Hall, Acting Mayor Harper observed the growing activity at the factory site with undisguised displeasure. The increased foot traffic, the delivery trucks, the sense of renewed purpose all represented a threat to his carefully cultivated plans. He pulled out his cell phone, checking to ensure no one could overhear. "We need to accelerate our schedule," he said tersely to the person on the other end. "This Blackwood situation is gaining too much positive momentum. Yes, I know the risks. Just make it happen." He disconnected, watching as Emma's green coat became visible among the workers below, her clipboard in hand as she directed a new delivery. Harper's grip tightened on his phone. The diary had been unexpected, as had Turner's complete confession. But contingency plans existed for a reason. One evening, returning to the construction site alone to retrieve forgotten documents, Emma found the lights already on in the temporary office. She approached cautiously, hearing raised voices through the partially open door. Harper and an unfamiliar man engaged in heated discussion. "This has gone far enough," Harper was saying, his normally diplomatic tone replaced with something harder. "We need to end this once and for all." "Mayor Harper," Blackwood stated firmly, crumpling the threatening note in his fist. "He purchased land surrounding the factory immediately after the bankruptcy. This has been his play all along." Emma absorbed this information, her mind racing to connect the pieces. The hostile opposition to the renovation suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just about the past, it was about present financial interests threatened by Blackwood's return. "How can you be sure it's him?" she asked, though the theory aligned with everything she'd witnessed. "Follow the money," Blackwood replied, his expression hardening. "I had my team investigate local real estate transactions after the factory closed. Harper systematically acquired neighboring parcels at rock-bottom prices. If the area remains blighted, he maintains control. If it's revitalized but under his terms, he profits enormously." The next morning found Emma in the dusty municipal records room, hunched over property ledgers and land transfer documents. The librarian, Mrs. Winters, had raised an eyebrow at Emma's request, but granted her access without question. "People have short memories in this town," Mrs. Winters commented, placing another volume of records before Emma. "But paper remembers everything." Emma traced her finger along the entries, finding exactly what Blackwood had described. A pattern of property acquisitions by various shell companies, all eventually leading back to Harper. The mayor had begun purchasing parcels within weeks of the factory's closure, each transaction coinciding with another wave of economic despair in Lakeside Falls. "He was banking on our failure," Emma murmured to herself. As she gathered her notes, a familiar name caught her eye. Martha Green, the former factory secretary. According to the visitor logs, Martha had accessed these same records repeatedly around the time of Turner's fraud. Emma found Martha's address in the phone directory and drove to the modest bungalow on the edge of town. The elderly woman answered the door cautiously, recognition slowly brightening her eyes. "Emma Reynolds? My goodness, you look just like your father." Inside Martha's meticulously kept home, surrounded by photographs of the factory in its heyday, Emma learned what her father had suspected years ago. "I saw them," Martha confirmed, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea. "Harper and Turner, meeting in the conference room after hours. This was weeks before the bankruptcy announcement. They thought no one was around, but I'd stayed late to finish payroll." "Did you hear what they discussed?" Martha nodded grimly. "Enough to know it wasn't legitimate business. Turner mentioned cooking the books, and Harper talked about opportunities once the factory closed. I told your father my suspicions." "Why didn't you come forward after his death?" Emma asked, trying to keep accusation from her tone. Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Fear, dear. Pure and simple. After what happened to your father, the rumors, his suicide, I was terrified. I was a widow with no other income. Harper made sure I got a position at City Hall afterward. I knew what that meant." Emma left with Martha's promise to provide a sworn statement about what she'd witnessed. The pieces were falling into place, but proof that would stand up in court remained elusive. Later that afternoon, Emma and Blackwood walked through downtown Lakeside Falls, an unlikely pair drawing curious stares from shopkeepers and pedestrians. Some nodded politely. Others quickly looked away. "They don't know what to make of us," Blackwood observed, seemingly unbothered by the attention. "Can you blame them? Half the town thinks you're here to exploit us. The other half is starting to hope you're a savior. Neither is comfortable territory." Blackwood smiled slightly. "And what do you think, Emma Reynolds?" The question hung between them, more weighted than its simplicity suggested. Emma considered her answer carefully. "I think you're someone trying to reconcile who you were with who you've become. I can understand that." They walked in companionable silence until reaching Harper's sprawling Victorian home on the hill overlooking the town. The mayor's surprised expression when he opened the door quickly transformed into professional cordiality. "Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Reynolds, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just neighborhood courtesy," Blackwood replied smoothly. "I thought we should discuss the interesting pattern of real estate acquisitions you've made around my factory site." Harper's facade didn't slip, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "My investments in Lakeside Falls have always been a matter of public record. I believe in this town's potential." "As do I," Blackwood countered, "though we seem to have different visions for what that potential looks like." "You have no proof of anything improper," Harper said, adjusting his expensive tie with manicured fingers. "Just speculation and coincidence. Hardly the basis for whatever you're implying." Emma stepped forward. "Martha Green remembers your late-night meetings with Turner. She's prepared to make a statement." For the first time, Harper's composure faltered. Martha is an elderly woman with a history of confusion, hardly a reliable witness. The confrontation ended in stalemate, with Harper's thinly veiled threats about proper channels and defamation concerns following them down the walkway. Back at the construction site, Emma watched new equipment being delivered, state-of-the-art manufacturing machinery that represented more investment than Lakeside Falls had seen in decades. Local workers observed with a mixture of hope and skepticism as the massive components were carefully positioned. Blackwood attempted to help move a support beam despite his injured arm, wincing visibly when the weight shifted unexpectedly. A nearby worker quickly stepped in to assist. "You shouldn't push yourself," Emma admonished when they were alone. "The doctor said at least 6 weeks before heavy lifting." "Some things can't wait," he replied, watching the factory taking shape with an intensity that transcended business interest. This was personal for him, a reclaiming of something lost. That evening, an impromptu gathering formed in the construction trailer. A dozen former factory employees had shown up with photographs and stories, creating an oral history of the place while offering insights about the original operations. "The ventilation system had this unique design," explained Frank Mercer, who had maintained the HVAC for 20 years. "Saved energy, but kept the floor comfortable even in July." Emma watched Blackwood absorb every detail, his questions revealing how deeply he cared about honoring the factory's legacy while moving it into the future. These men and women who had once viewed him with suspicion now leaned forward eagerly, their expertise respected and valued perhaps for the first time in years. The mood darkened briefly when Emma discovered Rusty limping back from his exploratory rounds of the site. A small cut on his paw pad left bloody prints on the trailer floor. "Could have been anything," Blackwood said as Emma cleaned the wound. "Construction sites have sharp objects." But the careful nature of the cut, its precision, suggested otherwise. Someone had deliberately injured the dog, a warning perhaps. Night had fallen by the time the gathering dispersed. Emma and Blackwood remained, sharing coffee from a thermos as they reviewed updated blueprints. "When did you decide to come back?" Emma asked, the question that had been lingering since she'd discovered his true identity. Blackwood set down his cup, considering his answer. "I always planned to return. Built my first company with that specific goal, to earn enough to come back and set things right. That must have been a powerful motivation. Your father gave me a chance when the entire system had written me off." His voice softened with rare vulnerability. "After I got on the bus that night, I made myself a promise that someday I'd return successful enough to clear his name and rebuild what had been lost." "He would have been proud of what you've accomplished," Emma said quietly. "Not of everything. There were compromises along the way." A shadow crossed his face. "When you have nothing, survival sometimes trumps ideals." Emma recognized the confession in his words, that Joey Miller's transformation into Thomas Blackwood hadn't been without moral costs. Rather than prying further, she showed him to the wall where she'd begun creating a mural of factory photographs, old blueprints alongside new renderings. "I've been documenting the transformation," she explained. "Before, during, and after." Blackwood studied the visual history, his fingers tracing the outline of the original structure. "This place was more home to me than anywhere I lived after my parents died. Your father noticed when no one else did that I was sleeping here sometimes when things got bad in the foster home." The personal revelation hung in the air, a piece of himself offered without calculation. Emma felt the weight of his trust and of how their paths had been invisibly connected through her father all these years. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a large group of local residents bearing casseroles, thermoses of coffee, and offers of help. Word of Turner's confession had spread rapidly, and with it, a reassessment of Robert Reynolds' legacy, and by extension, a willingness to believe in the factory's rebirth. Emma welcomed the supporters, organizing a sign-up sheet for volunteers while Blackwood discussed technical aspects with those who had specialized skills. The tide of public opinion was turning, albeit gradually. From across the street, Harper observed the growing gathering through binoculars, his face tightening with each new arrival. He dialed his phone with sharp, angry movements. "Things are accelerating," he snapped to the person who answered. "We need to move faster. I don't care about the risks. I've worked too long on this to lose it all now." The next morning, Emma received a formal letter from the city council, voting unanimously to support the factory renovation project following Harper's conspicuously absent signature and abrupt vacation announcement. A significant victory, though Emma suspected Harper wouldn't surrender his plans so easily. When she returned alone to the construction site later that evening to retrieve some forgotten documents, Emma found the lights already on and heard voices raised in heated discussion. Harper and an unfamiliar man were arguing about finishing this once and for all. Emma pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering in her chest as she strained to hear the conversation. Through the partially open door, the light from the temporary office cast long shadows across the construction site. "I've invested too much to watch it all collapse now," Harper hissed, his typically smooth political voice stripped raw with frustration. "Tomorrow's electrical installation is our last good opportunity." "This isn't what I signed up for," the other man replied. Emma recognized him as Mitchell, the contractor who had been with Harper that night before the fire. "Sabotage is one thing, but you're talking about something that could kill people." "Don't be dramatic. The surge will hit the main panel, destroy the new equipment. Insurance covers the loss, Blackwood faces another delay, and investor confidence crumbles." Harper's voice hardened. "Besides, the panel room will be empty during testing." Emma's fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone to record the conversation, but the device slipped from her grasp, clattering against the metal trailer step. Inside, the voices fell silent. Heart in her throat, Emma sprinted toward the shadows behind a stack of construction materials as the door flew open. "Someone's here," Mitchell called out, peering into the darkness. Emma crouched lower, hardly daring to breathe as footsteps crunched across the gravel. "Check the perimeter," Harper ordered. "I'll look in the main building." The moment they split up, Emma slipped away, keeping to the shadows until she reached her car. With shaking hands, she called Blackwood. "They're planning to sabotage the electrical installation tomorrow," she blurted the moment he answered. "Harper and that contractor who was with him at the fire. Something about causing a surge in the main panel." "Where are you?" Blackwood's voice was sharp with concern. "Leaving the site now, they know someone overheard them." "Go straight to my hotel. I'll meet you there. Don't stop for anyone." 20 minutes later, Emma paced the expansive suite at Lakeside's only luxury hotel, while Blackwood conferred with his security team and Chen. "The police suggest we evacuate the site tomorrow and reschedule the installation," Chen reported, hanging up his phone. "Detective Collins wants to set up surveillance to catch them in the act. If we cancel, they'll just find another opportunity," Blackwood argued. "We need to end this definitively." Emma stopped pacing. "If we evacuate, they'll know we discovered their plan. But if we proceed normally, they might try anyway and we can catch them," Blackwood finished. "Exactly." "That's extremely risky," Chen protested. "The electrical systems for the entire factory will be live. A deliberate surge could cause catastrophic damage, possibly fire." "Not if we're prepared for it," Blackwood countered. "We can adjust the installation schedule, have security positioned strategically, and work with the police to monitor the situation discreetly." Emma hugged herself, the memory of flames consuming the factory still vivid. "Is it worth the risk?" Blackwood's eyes met hers. "Harper won't stop until he's forced to. This might be our only chance to expose him completely." After the security team left to coordinate with police, Emma and Blackwood spent hours reviewing the electrical installation plans, identifying vulnerabilities where sabotage might occur. The contractor Mitchell had disappeared from town, his cell phone disconnected, and apartment emptied. "He was seen boarding a bus to Chicago this evening," reported the private investigator Blackwood had hired. "Left in a hurry by all accounts." "So Harper will have to work alone or recruit someone new," Emma mused, studying the factory's electrical schematics spread across the hotel room table. "Makes him more desperate, more likely to make mistakes," Blackwood replied, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his concern. By midnight, they had formulated a plan, a careful choreography of normal construction activity, concealed security, and technical safeguards. Despite her exhaustion, Emma couldn't help admiring the strategic mind beneath Blackwood's composed exterior. Boy her father had taught. Chess had indeed learned to think several moves ahead. Morning arrived with overcast skies and a biting wind that cut through Emma's green coat as she supervised the electrical crew's arrival. Everything appeared normal. Workers checking in, equipment being positioned, coffee thermoses passed around. Only she and a few key personnel knew about the hidden security cameras installed overnight or the plainclothes officers positioned strategically around the site. "Good morning, Ms. Reynolds," called the lead electrician cheerfully. "Big day today. Once these panels are live, we're officially on the grid again." Emma managed a smile that didn't betray her churning stomach. "Exciting milestone. Everything on schedule?" "Absolutely. Preliminary tests start at 10, full system integration at 2. The morning crawled by with excruciating slowness. Emma maintained her regular routine, clipboard in hand as she moved about the site, all while scanning for any sign of Harper. Blackwood remained in the office trailer, coordinating with security through an earpiece disguised as a hearing aid. At precisely 11:42, the site's security cameras caught Harper entering through the rear access point, dressed in workman's clothes and carrying a tool bag. He moved with purpose toward the electrical room, using a key card that shouldn't have been in his possession. "He's in." Blackwood's voice came through Emma's concealed earpiece. "Security is tracking him, but they won't move in until he makes his attempt. We need concrete evidence." Emma felt her pulse quicken. What if something goes wrong? That room contains enough voltage to— "Trust the plan," Blackwood interrupted gently. "The system has redundant safeguards, and Harper isn't suicidal. He'll plant the device and leave before activation." 3 police officers in plain clothes were strategically positioned around the electrical room, while Blackwood monitored the security feeds from the trailer. Emma tried to focus on her regular duties, but found herself constantly checking her phone for updates. At 1:30, with the main electrical test approaching, Harper was observed leaving the building, striding confidently toward the parking area. The moment he passed the perimeter, officers moved to intercept him. "Device located," came the terse update in Emma's earpiece. "Sophisticated timer connected to the main relay. Technical team moving in to neutralize." Relief washed over her as she watched Harper being escorted to an unmarked police car, his outraged protests carrying across the construction yard. It was over. They'd caught him red-handed, or so she thought. At 1:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled power activation, every alarm in the system suddenly triggered simultaneously. Emma's phone buzzed with an emergency alert from the security team. "Secondary device detected. Evacuate immediately." Chaos erupted as workers rushed to exit, emergency protocols activating across the site. Through her earpiece, Emma heard Blackwood's voice, unnaturally tense. "The first device was a decoy. The real one is hardwired into the main transformer. It's already counting down." Emma raced toward the electrical room, ignoring the flow of evacuating workers moving in the opposite direction. Blackwood met her at the entrance, his face grim. "The technical team can't disarm it remotely. The device will trigger a catastrophic surge when the system goes live." "Can't we just cut the main power supply?" Emma asked frantically. "The device has a failsafe. If it loses connection to the grid, it activates immediately. Either way, we lose everything." A technician emerged from the electrical room, shaking his head. "The timer's encrypted. We'd need at least an hour to bypass it safely." "We don't have an hour," Blackwood said. "How long until detonation?" 12 minutes, sir." The evacuation continued around them, workers and emergency personnel streaming toward the safety perimeter. In the distance, sirens wailed as additional fire trucks approached. "I want everyone out," Blackwood ordered. "Clear the entire building." As the technical team reluctantly departed, Blackwood turned to Emma. "You should go too. Get to safety." "What are you going to do?" she demanded, already knowing the answer from his expression. "Try to minimize the damage. If I can isolate the main transformer from the rest of the system before it triggers, that's suicide. The current would... I can't watch this place burn again, he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. Your father wouldn't have abandoned it. Neither will I. Emma stared at him, suddenly seeing the desperate 16-year-old boy beneath the billionaire's composed exterior. The boy who had lost everything once before. There has to be another way, she insisted, her mind racing through the electrical diagrams they'd studied. The device is connected to the main transformer, but what if we reroute through the secondary system? There's no time to reconfigure. We don't reconfigure, Emma interrupted, the solution crystallizing. We use the old emergency backup system. Dad always said they overbuilt it in the original design. She pointed to the schematic still open on the nearby workstation. If I can access the central duct, I can reach the main junction where all the systems converge. Understanding dawned in Blackwood's eyes. You could disconnect the primary circuit before the surge hits. But the space is too narrow for any of us to... Not for me, Emma said with determination. I've been crawling through this factory's maintenance spaces since I was a kid. The technical team returned with specialized equipment. The lead technician studied the diagrams, then nodded reluctantly. Theoretically possible. You'd need to cut the main power trunk line while leaving the monitoring circuit intact. The device would think it's still connected to a live system. I'll talk you through it via headset, the technician explained, equipping Emma with tools and protective gear. But the moment you cut that line, you'll need to clear the area immediately. If the device detects the interruption... I understand, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. Blackwood caught her arm as she prepared to enter the maintenance duct. I can't ask you to risk yourself for this. You're not asking. She managed a tight smile. And I'm not just doing it for you or the factory. I'm doing it for my father, for this town, for myself. For a moment it seemed Blackwood might try to stop her, conflict evident in his expression. Be careful, he finally said. I can't risk losing you too. The duct was narrower than Emma remembered from childhood explorations, the metal warm against her gloved hands as she navigated by the beam of her headlamp. The technician's voice guided her through the labyrinthine passages toward the central junction box. 7 minutes remaining, came the update in her earpiece. You're approaching the main junction now. Emma squeezed through the final section, emerging into a small maintenance space where massive cables converged. The device was immediately visible, a complex assembly of circuits connected to the main power trunk. I see it, she confirmed, examining the setup carefully. Walking through disconnection sequence now. Following the technician's instructions, Emma carefully isolated each secondary circuit while monitoring the device's indicator lights. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool air. 2 minutes remaining, the voice warned. The primary disconnect is the heavy black cable on your left. One clean cut, then get out immediately. Emma positioned the insulated cutting tools, took a deep breath, and sliced through the cable with all her strength. A thunderous boom shook the entire structure as the lights went out, plunging everything into total darkness. No one knew if she had successfully deactivated the device or just triggered a catastrophic reaction chain. Darkness engulfed the factory as the emergency lights flickered weakly to life, casting eerie shadows across the rubble-strewn floor. In the makeshift command center, Blackwood's breath caught in his throat as monitors blinked back to life one by one, displaying nothing but static. Emma? His voice echoed in the sudden silence that followed the explosion, the radio in his hand emitting only a soft hiss of white noise. Emma, do you copy? The technical team scrambled to restore communications while security personnel rushed toward the central junction area. Blackwood moved to follow them, but Chen caught his arm. Sir, it's not safe. The structural integrity... I don't care, Blackwood snapped, wrenching free. Find her. As he pushed through the chaos toward the maintenance access, a distant sound caught his attention, a rhythmic tapping coming from inside the ventilation shaft. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against the metal. Emma? The tapping paused, then a muffled voice called out, "I could use some light down here." Relief swept through him with such force it was almost painful. Within minutes, emergency workers had removed the access panel, revealing Emma's soot-streaked face, her headlamp cracked but still partially functional. "The good news," she said as they helped her out, "is that I disconnected the primary circuit before the device triggered." She winced as she straightened, her hands raw despite the protective gloves. "The bad news is that it had a secondary failsafe that blew anyway, but much smaller than intended." Blackwood studied her for injuries while technicians assessed the damage to the electrical systems. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," Emma replied simply, dusting debris from her ever-present green coat. "And neither was anyone else." Outside, as dawn broke over Lakeside Falls, Emma sat on the bumper of an ambulance, refusing further medical attention despite the paramedics' insistence that her mild smoke inhalation warranted a hospital visit. The local newspaper's editor had already arrived, camera in hand, capturing the aftermath of what would become front-page news. By mid-morning, the story had spread throughout the town and beyond. Mayor Harper arrested while attempting to sabotage the factory renovation. His accomplice apprehended at a bus station 3 towns over. Both now faced serious criminal charges, and the police had seized documents from Harper's office that hinted at a wider conspiracy. Emma and Blackwood sat side by side in his hotel suite, reading the preliminary report that Chen had just delivered. Page after page detailed Harper's scheme: the systematic acquisition of properties around the factory site, zoning changes quietly implemented, promises to outside investors about a future lakeside luxury development once the factory project inevitably failed. "Harper didn't just want the factory to stay closed," Emma observed, studying a map of property acquisitions. "He needed it to fail spectacularly if it reopened. That would complete the devaluation of the entire district. And he would swoop in to buy the remaining parcels at rock-bottom prices," Blackwood added, his expression grim. "Classic disaster capitalism." Emma set down the report, suddenly exhausted. "My father never trusted him, said Harper was too polished, too perfect." "Your father was an excellent judge of character." Blackwood hesitated, then placed a small flash drive on the table between them. "My investigators found something else while searching Harper's digital records. Emails between him and Turner, dating back to before the original bankruptcy." Emma stared at the drive, understanding instantly what it contained. "Proof that they conspired to frame my father." "Yes, the district attorney is reviewing it now. They'll likely file additional charges." A week later, Emma sat in a private hospital room, holding her mother's hand as they watched the local news report on the investigation. Patricia Reynolds looked frail against the white sheets, but her eyes were clear and focused on the screen. "In a stunning development," the reporter announced, standing before City Hall, "documents discovered during the investigation into Mayor Harper have revealed a years-long conspiracy to defraud Lakeside Manufacturing and subsequently frame company accountant Robert Reynolds for the crimes. The district attorney's office has confirmed that Harper and former plant manager Jake Turner orchestrated the embezzlement scheme that led to the factory's closure 15 years ago." Patricia squeezed Emma's hand, tears sliding silently down her face. "He knew," she whispered. "Robert knew something was wrong with the books. That's why he was staying late, working weekends. He was trying to protect everyone," Emma said softly, finally understanding the weight her father had carried. "The workers, the town, us." Her mother nodded, dabbing at her eyes. "When they accused him, it broke something inside him. Not just his reputation, but his faith in justice." The door opened as Blackwood entered, carrying a modest bouquet of wildflowers that seemed at odds with his tailored suit. Rusty padded in beside him, having somehow charmed the hospital staff into bending their no-pets policy. "Mrs. Reynolds," Blackwood greeted Patricia with genuine warmth. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, now that the truth is finally coming out." She gestured toward the television, "though I wish Robert had lived to see it." After a brief visit, Emma walked Blackwood to the hospital's main entrance. "The doctor says she can come home tomorrow. The new treatment seems to be helping." "I'm glad to hear it." He hesitated, then added, "I took the liberty of consulting with some specialists in Chicago. There's an experimental program that's showing promising results for conditions like your mother's." Emma tensed slightly. "We can't afford—" "Lakeside Manufacturing's new employee healthcare plan would cover it," he interrupted smoothly. "As the project coordinator, you're entitled to comprehensive benefits. I've already spoken with HR." Before Emma could respond, Blackwood changed the subject. "The reconstruction team reports that most of the electrical damage was confined to the main junction box. We can resume work by next week." That evening, Emma met with the hospital's administrative director, who surprisingly announced plans to modernize their aging medical wing. "An anonymous donor has provided funding specifically for updating our facilities," the director explained, showing Emma the architectural renderings. "The renovations will include a specialized treatment center for long-term care patients like your mother." Emma recognized Blackwood's hand in this immediately, though she said nothing. Back at the apartment, she created a detailed timeline of events spanning the last 15 years, connecting her father's suspicions to Turner's fraud, Harper's land grab, and finally to Blackwood's return. The complex web of cause and effect struck her as both tragic and strangely beautiful. How actions set in motion years ago continued to ripple through their lives. As spring slowly thawed Lakeside Falls, the factory renovation accelerated. Each morning, Emma walked the perimeter, documenting progress with her camera. Workers nodded respectfully as she passed, many now calling her by name. The once abandoned structure was gradually transforming, its skeleton reinforced with new steel, its brick facade cleaned and restored to its original warm red. One morning, Emma arrived to find Martha, the former secretary, waiting at the gates with a cardboard box. "Found these in my attic," Martha explained, opening the box to reveal pristine architectural blueprints and operational manuals from the factory's heyday. "Thought they might help with the reconstruction." "These are incredible," Emma marveled carefully, examining the detailed drawings. "The original ventilation system schematics are exactly what the engineers have been trying to recreate." That evening, the construction team hosted an impromptu barbecue on the grounds, using oil drums converted into grills. As twilight descended, workers shared stories of the old factory with newer employees, creating a bridge between past and future. Emma observed Blackwood moving easily among them, his usual reserve softened as he listened to their anecdotes and technical insights. Later, as the gathering dispersed, Emma and Blackwood found themselves walking along the lake shore, now free of ice. Rusty raced ahead, chasing shorebirds and exploring the newly greened landscape. "Your father would be proud," Blackwood said quietly, looking back at the illuminated factory in the distance, its lights reflecting in the dark water of the lake. "Of the factory?" Emma asked. "Of you," he corrected. "Your courage, your determination. He always said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone he knew, even as a child." The personal observation caught Emma off guard. "He talked about me?" "Often. During chess games, lunch breaks." Blackwood smiled slightly at the memory. "He kept your school picture in his desk drawer, brought it out whenever he told stories about your latest academic achievement or sports victory." They walked in comfortable silence until reaching a small dock extending into the lake. Emma helped Blackwood remove his sling. His doctors had finally cleared him to discontinue it permanently. Their eyes met in the moonlight as her hands lingered briefly on his shoulder, an unspoken acknowledgement of how far they'd come from their first antagonistic meeting. Back at her apartment, Emma created a new wall display, photographs of the factory past and present, arranged chronologically to show its transformation. Between the images, she placed newspaper clippings documenting Harper's arrest, Turner's expanded confession, and the town's gradual healing from old wounds. Blackwood studied the display with evident emotion when he visited to discuss the next phase of construction. His finger traced the outline of the original factory and the oldest photograph. "The first company I bought was a small tech startup in Seattle," he confided. "I paid more than market value because their facility reminded me of the factory, the brick exterior, the large windows. It was irrational from a business perspective." "But not from a human one," Emma observed. "No." He met her eyes. "Everything I built, every company I acquired, it was all working toward a single goal, earning enough power and influence to come back and set things right." A formal letter arrived the following day from the reconstituted city council, voting unanimously to support the factory project. The interim mayor's signature was prominently displayed, along with a personal note expressing the town's gratitude for the economic revitalization already becoming evident. That night, Emma received a strange anonymous call. "We found something of yours at the construction site, a blue hat." The call disconnected before she could respond. Her father's blue hat, the one she'd been wearing when she rescued Rusty, had been missing since the fire, presumably destroyed. Blackwood immediately ordered a review of the security camera footage, but the systems had been temporarily offline during an electrical upgrade. Whoever had recovered the hat had known exactly when the cameras wouldn't be watching. On the eve of the main machinery installation, Emma's phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Opening it revealed a photograph of her blue hat perched atop the electrical control panel that was scheduled to be activated the next morning. Below the image was a simple message: "Tomorrow will be an electrifying day." Emma stared at the photo on her phone, the blue hat, her father's hat, positioned with deliberate menace atop the electrical control panel. Her fingers trembled slightly as she zoomed in, searching for any clue about who might have placed it there. The timestamp showed the message had been sent just minutes ago. "It's a direct threat," Blackwood said, looking over her shoulder at the image. His face, normally composed, tightened with barely contained anger. "They're planning to target tomorrow's electrical installation." They were in the temporary office trailer, finalizing preparations for the next day's crucial milestone. Powering up the factory's main production systems for the first time since the renovation began. The machinery installation had been completed that afternoon, representing millions in investment and countless hours of labor. "I'm calling Detective Collins," Emma said, already dialing. "We need to shut everything down until they sweep the building." The detective arrived within 20 minutes, accompanied by a police tech specialist and the bomb squad commander. After examining the photograph and the threatening message, Collins advised immediate evacuation and postponement of the power activation. "We can sweep the facility tonight, bring in K9 units, check every inch of the electrical systems," Collins explained. "Better safe than sorry." Blackwood paced the small office, considering the options. "If we evacuate, whoever sent this will know we discovered their plan. They'll just regroup and try again when we're not expecting it." "So what do you suggest?" Collins asked. "Proceeding as if we haven't been warned about a potential sabotage?" "Not exactly," Emma interjected, an idea forming. "What if we maintain normal operations on the surface but conduct a covert search overnight? Minimal personnel, absolute discretion." Blackwood nodded slowly. "A small team could check the electrical systems without alerting whoever is watching that we're onto them." "It's risky," Collins warned. "If they've already planted something. More risky than giving them another opportunity when we're not expecting it," Emma countered. "Harper is in custody, but clearly he had more accomplices than just Mitchell." After heated debate, they agreed on a compromise. The main electrical activation would proceed as scheduled, but with enhanced security measures and a complete overnight inspection of all systems. The security team would be expanded, with plainclothes officers scattered throughout the facility. My tech specialists need detailed schematics of the electrical system, Collins said, preparing to leave. Anything to help us identify what might have been tampered with. Emma retrieved the comprehensive electrical plans, spreading them across the conference table. The main control panel is here, she pointed, but there are junction boxes located throughout the facility. Someone with knowledge of the system could potentially access it from multiple points. As the police officers departed to organize their teams, Blackwood received an urgent call from his investigator. "Mitchell has disappeared," he reported after hanging up. He was under surveillance at his sister's house in Chicago, but somehow slipped away during a shift change. His phone is off the grid. "He could be anywhere by now," Emma said, feeling a cold knot form in her stomach, "including back in Lakeside Falls." "I'll alert Collins," Blackwood replied, already texting the detective, "and double the external security perimeter." Throughout the night, specialists methodically examined every inch of the electrical system, searching for anything unusual or out of place. Emma remained on site, coordinating between the police technicians and the factory's engineering team. By dawn, they had found nothing suspicious. "Could the message have been a bluff?" Chen suggested as they reconvened in the office, exhaustion evident on everyone's faces. "A psychological tactic to disrupt operations." "The hat is real," Emma countered, stubbornly certain, "and someone had to place it on that control panel. The threat is real, too." Blackwood studied the electrical schematics one more time, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "What if we're looking in the wrong places? The message specified tomorrow will be electrifying. That suggests the activation sequence itself is the target." The chief electrical engineer, Dr. Patel, nodded thoughtfully. "The startup procedure requires a specific sequence of power loads. If someone introduced a device designed to create a power surge during that specific sequence, it could bypass our standard surge protectors," another engineer finished, understanding dawning on his face, "because the system naturally experiences controlled power fluctuations during startup." A renewed, more focused inspection began immediately, targeting components specifically involved in the power-up sequence. An hour later, a technician emerged from the main transformer room, his expression grim. "Found it," he announced, holding up a small device. "Sophisticated little bastard, designed to monitor the power signature during startup and introduce a massive surge at precisely the right moment." "Can you disarm it?" Blackwood asked. "Already did. But that's not all." The technician held up his tablet displaying a schematic. "It's connected to several secondary devices throughout the system. If we had tried to remove it without properly disabling it first, it would have triggered immediately." Emma felt a chill despite the morning warmth. Mitchell knew exactly what he was doing. This could have destroyed everything. "Not just the equipment," Dr. Patel added solemnly. "A surge of that magnitude could have caused a catastrophic fire, possibly explosions." With the immediate threat neutralized, debate turned to whether they should proceed with the scheduled activation or postpone it. Emma argued for continuing as planned. "If we delay, whoever is behind this will know their device was discovered," she reasoned. "This might be our best chance to catch them, watching, waiting for their sabotage to succeed." Collins agreed, positioning plainclothes officers around the perimeter while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. The official power-up ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., with local press and town officials invited to witness the factory's rebirth. At 10:30 a.m., as workers and engineers performed final checks, Blackwood's phone chimed with an alert from the security system. He opened the notification to find a live camera feed showing Mitchell entering the facility through a service entrance, using what appeared to be a valid access card. "He's here," Blackwood said tightly, showing Emma the feed. "Southeast entrance, moving toward the electrical substation." Collins quickly deployed officers to intercept, but maintained radio silence to avoid alerting Mitchell. Emma and Blackwood monitored the security feed from the office, watching as Mitchell made his way confidently through the facility, clearly familiar with the layout. "He's checking his phone constantly," Emma observed, "like he's waiting for confirmation of something." "Or controlling something remotely," Blackwood suggested, a new urgency in his voice. "What if the device we found isn't the only one?" Even as he voiced the concern, Mitchell stopped abruptly in a service corridor, typing rapidly on his phone. On another screen, alarms suddenly flared across the electrical monitoring system. "Power spike in junction box 7, called out the monitoring technician. "Something's activating in the system." "The device is active," Dr. Patel confirmed, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "But it shouldn't be. We disabled it." "There must be a secondary trigger," Blackwood realized. "Mitchell just activated it remotely." The technical team scrambled to respond, trying to isolate the affected systems before the cascade could begin. On the security monitor, they watched as Mitchell, apparently satisfied, turned to leave, only to find his path blocked by 2 police officers. "We need to shut down the entire grid connection," Dr. Patel advised urgently. "Cut everything before the surge hits the main transformers." "If we do that, we lose all the safety systems too," another engineer protested. "The automated fire suppression, the emergency lights, everything." A message appeared on Emma's phone from an unknown number. "Too late. The timer is already active." She showed it to Blackwood, whose expression hardened. "Can we disarm it remotely?" The technical team shook their heads in unison. "The device is hardwired directly into the power infrastructure. It's designed to trigger when it detects the specific power signature of the startup sequence." "Or," added Dr. Patel grimly, "if it detects a complete power loss, which it would interpret as an attempt to disarm it." "So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't," Emma said, frustration evident in her voice. Blackwood studied the electrical schematics one last time, his eyes fixed on the central junction where all the major systems converged. "There is one option. If someone could access the central duct, they could manually disconnect the primary circuit before the surge hits." The lead technician nodded slowly. "Theoretically, yes. You'd need to cut the main transmission line while leaving the monitoring circuit intact. The device would think it's still connected to a live system." "How much time do we have?" Emma asked. "Based on the power fluctuations, approximately 12 minutes before the surge reaches critical levels." Blackwood was already moving toward the maintenance access point. "I'll go in. Guide me through the procedure remotely." "You won't fit," Emma said, catching his arm. "The maintenance ducts are barely 18 inches wide in some sections. Besides, your shoulder still isn't fully healed." She glanced at the blueprints, memories from childhood superimposing themselves over the technical diagrams. "I know these ducts. My dad used to take me through them during maintenance shutdowns. I can get to the junction box faster than anyone else." Blackwood's objection was immediate. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "We don't have time to argue," Emma insisted, already shrugging off her jacket. "Get me the tools and a headlamp, and someone who can talk me through the disconnection procedure." The technical team quickly assembled what she would need: insulated cutting tools, a specialized voltage meter, protective gloves, and a headlamp with integrated communication. "Once you reach the main junction, you'll see a bundle of heavy cables," Dr. Patel explained, showing her diagrams on his tablet. "The primary power trunk is the black cable marked with red tape. You'll need to cut it completely, while ensuring the smaller monitoring wire remains intact." "And then get out immediately," added the safety officer. "If the device detects the disconnection, it could trigger a feedback pulse through the remaining circuits." Blackwood caught Emma's arm as she prepared to enter the narrow maintenance duct. "I can't ask you to risk yourself for this." "You're not asking," she replied, adjusting her headlamp. "And I've been crawling through these spaces since I was a kid." His grip tightened slightly. "Emma, please. There has to be another way." "There isn't." Not in the time we have left. She met his gaze directly. I can do this. After a moment, he released her arm. Be careful. I can't risk losing you too. The maintenance duct was narrower than Emma remembered, its metal walls pressing close as she crawled forward on elbows and knees. The beam from her headlamp illuminated years of dust and cobwebs, the air stale and warm against her face. 9 minutes remaining, Dr. Patel's voice came through her earpiece. Take the next junction to your left. Emma navigated the maze of ducts, her movement swift and sure despite the confined space. The route was familiar, a ghost memory from childhood explorations with her father. 6 minutes. You're approaching the main junction now. The duct widened slightly as she reached the central hub where the primary electrical systems converged. Below her, through a grated section of flooring, she could see the massive junction box with its complex array of cables and connections. I see it, she confirmed, carefully removing the access panel, beginning the disconnection sequence. Following Dr. Patel's instructions, Emma methodically isolated each secondary circuit, her gloved hands moving with deliberate precision, despite the growing heat and the pressure of time ticking away. Primary trunk identified, she reported, positioning the cutting tool around the thick black cable marked with red tape. Ready to cut on your mark. 2 minutes remaining, came the tense reply. Make one clean cut, then evacuate immediately. Don't wait to confirm results. Emma drew a deep breath, steadied her hands, and closed the cutting tool with all her strength. For a split second, nothing happened. Then an ear-splitting boom shook the entire structure as every light went out at once, plunging her into absolute darkness. A deafening silence followed, broken only by the distant sound of emergency sirens as Emma waited, frozen in place, uncertain whether she had just saved the factory or triggered its destruction. Darkness enveloped Emma, the boom still reverberating through the metal ductwork around her. For several terrifying seconds, she remained perfectly still, uncertain whether she had succeeded in preventing disaster or triggered it instead. The complete absence of light was disorienting, her own rapid breathing the only sound she could hear. Then, gradually, the emergency lights flickered to life, casting a weak amber glow through the grated section beneath her. Emma exhaled shakily, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Emma, do you copy? Dr. Patel's voice crackled through her headset, distorted but audible. I'm here, she responded, her voice steadier. Then she felt. What happened? Did it work? System shutdown successful, came the relieved reply. The surge was contained before it could propagate through the network. Primary electrical systems are offline, but the structural integrity is intact. Emma allowed herself a moment of relief before beginning the careful retreat through the narrow duct. The confined space, combined with the adrenaline crash, made her movements clumsy and slow. Emma! Blackwood's voice replaced Patel's, tension evident even through the static. Are you all right? I'm fine, she assured him, continuing to navigate through the metal passage. Just making my way back now. The ducts seem longer on the return trip. When she finally emerged from the maintenance access, blinking in the emergency lighting, Blackwood was waiting, his normally composed face etched with worry. Without hesitation, he pulled her into a tight embrace, seemingly unconcerned about the dust and grime covering her clothes. Don't ever do that again, he murmured against her hair. Emma let herself lean into him for just a moment before pulling back. Did they catch Mitchell? In custody, Blackwood confirmed, leading her toward the command center where the technical team had regrouped. He was attempting to flee when the power went out. The emergency protocols locked all exit doors. Outside daylight revealed the extent of the incident's impact. While the factory structure remained intact, police had established a wide perimeter around the property. News crews gathered at the barricades, cameras trained on the building, and the officials conferring near the entrance. Emma watched from a window as Mitchell was escorted to a police vehicle, his expression a mixture of defiance and defeat. Beside her, Blackwood studied the man who had nearly destroyed everything they'd rebuilt. Why would he risk returning? Emma wondered aloud. He had to know we'd be looking for him after Harper's arrest. Money, Blackwood replied, simply. The investigator found transfers to offshore accounts linked to Mitchell. Substantial amounts, far more than Harper could access from jail. So Harper had another backer, Emma realized. Someone with deeper pockets and more to lose. Chen approached with a preliminary damage assessment, his typically unflappable demeanor showing signs of strain. The electrical infrastructure will need significant repairs before we can attempt another power-up sequence, but the core production equipment appears undamaged. How long? Blackwood asked. 3 weeks minimum, Chen estimated. We'll need specialized components that aren't easy to source. Emma felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her as the adrenaline fully subsided. At least we still have a factory to repair. 3 months later, Emma stood on the freshly paved pathway leading to the factory's main entrance, watching workers install the restored original sign above the doors, Lakeside Manufacturing, Esther 1937. The late summer sun glinted off the polished letters, a physical manifestation of the phoenix-like renewal that had transformed not just the building, but the town itself. Following Mitchell's arrest and subsequent plea deal, investigators had uncovered the full scope of Harper's scheme, including connections to a real estate conglomerate that had been systematically acquiring distressed industrial properties throughout the region. The documents, now part of a federal investigation, had cleared Robert Reynolds' name completely, acknowledging him as a whistleblower who had been silenced. Emma adjusted the collar of her green coat, now adorned with a small pendant, a miniature version of her father's blue hat, crafted in silver and hanging from a simple chain. The original hat, recovered from the electrical panel, had been too damaged to save, but this token preserved its memory and meaning. Nervous? Blackwood asked, appearing beside her in one of his impeccable suits, though the formal attire couldn't hide the warmth that had gradually replaced his earlier reserve. A little, Emma admitted. It's been a long road to get here. The crowd gathering for the reopening ceremony already numbered in the hundreds, former workers, town residents, media, and dignitaries. A temporary stage had been erected near the entrance, chairs arranged in neat rows facing the factory's restored facade. Martha Green, now appointed as the factory's unofficial historian, directed people to their seats with the same efficiency she had once applied to managing the office decades earlier. Emma's mother, Patricia, sat in a specially reserved section at the front, her health visibly improved thanks to the experimental treatment program Blackwood had arranged. As the ceremony began, Emma took her place on the stage alongside Blackwood and other key figures in the reconstruction. The newly elected mayor spoke briefly about renewal and second chances, followed by Chen outlining the factory's technological innovations and economic impact. When Blackwood rose to speak, a hush fell over the crowd. Many still viewed him with a mixture of awe and lingering suspicion, the mysterious billionaire whose true identity had sparked endless speculation. "This factory," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled gathering, "represents more than just an economic investment or a business venture. For many of us, it was once a second home, a place where generations worked side by side, where children grew up watching their parents build something tangible and meaningful." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience before settling briefly on Patricia Reynolds. "Some of you knew me long ago, though by a different name. Some of you knew my parents, who worked on this very production floor. And some of you, like Robert Reynolds, saw potential in a troubled kid when others had given up." A murmur passed through the crowd at this personal revelation, though the details of Blackwood's transformation from Joey Miller to Thomas Blackwood had gradually become common knowledge in Lakeside Falls. "This city taught me," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "that sometimes we need to break through the ice to discover the truth, hiding beneath the surface. After the ceremonial ribbon cutting, performed jointly by Emma and Martha as symbols of the factory's future and past, the crowd dispersed to tour the renovated facility. Production would begin officially the following week, with the first shift already hired and trained. Many of them former employees returning to their old workplace, now transformed with cutting-edge technology. Emma made her way through the bustling reception in the main hall, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about the Second Chance program she now directed, an initiative providing training and employment opportunities for at-risk youth and those seeking to rebuild their lives after setbacks. Later, as the celebration wound down, Emma found herself walking with Blackwood along the lakeshore path. The water sparkled in the late afternoon sun, free of ice and fully alive with summer activity, a stark contrast to that winter day when she'd first rescued Rusty. The dog himself raced ahead of them now, chasing after birds and doubling back occasionally, as if to ensure they were still following. His enthusiasm remained undimmed by the passing months, his joy in simple pleasures a constant reminder of what truly mattered. "Will you keep the Blackwood name?" Emma asked suddenly, voicing a question she'd been considering for some time. "Now that everyone knows the truth?" He considered this, hands in his pockets as they walked. "Thomas Blackwood built an empire," he replied thoughtfully, watching Rusty bound after a butterfly. "Created companies, made investments, developed a certain reputation. But Joey Miller found his way back home." Emma smiled, adjusting the blue hat pendant at her throat. "My father used to say that the best rescues are those where both sides are saved." They continued in comfortable silence until Rusty returned with a tennis ball, dropping it expectantly at their feet. Blackwood threw it, sending the dog racing across the grassy shoreline. "You know," he said with a half-smile, turning to Emma, "for someone who risked her life for an unknown dog, you took quite a while to trust me." "That's because," Emma replied, laughing as Rusty returned with the ball yet again, "unlike Rusty, you didn't have a collar with your real name on it." The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, its light turning the lake's surface to burnished gold. In the distance, the factory stood as a silhouette against the changing sky, its windows glowing with interior light. No longer an abandoned shell, but a living, working part of the community once more. As they watched the sunset reflecting on the waters of the now ice-free lake, Blackwood gently took Emma's hand, suggesting not just the beginning of a new chapter for the town, but also for the two of them, proving that some truths, like ice, only need the right warmth to reveal themselves.